Good morning. Good morning. Here we are, August 9th, 2017 in sunny Edmonton, Alberta. Last couple of days been kind of miserable and rainy, but today's pretty nice. I'd like to talk to everybody today with regards to how you can extract yourself from the slave camp. Now, first of all, I'd like to say I have not done this. I don't wish to imply that I'm leading people down some kind of furry road that has no end. Quite the opposite. I wish to tell you the road does have an end. And with the aid of other men and women acting in concert, we can achieve the destination. I am saying that a single man or woman by themselves may have quite the ordeal and find it extremely difficult, even impossible to do, because you're not taken seriously when you're by yourself. Now, back in 1948, all the other countries of the world decided to join up with the United Nations, and they produced the United Nations Human Rights Charter, guaranteeing to protect the rights and freedoms of men and women around the world from oppression, from bondage, from slavery. Now, the reason that was put in place is because you have to have an escape clause for something that could be seen as an intentionally forced fraud, an extortion racket of immense proportions. There must be a way to escape a religious fraud, and there is. Like I said, in 1948, if you read the Declaration on Human Rights, you'll see that it includes men and women as well as persons and individuals. The definitions between these words are quite important because you're not a person, you're either a man or a woman, and you're not an individual because an individual is a descriptor for many millions of different things. An individual fork, an individual piece of paper, an individual star. It's just a descriptor. It certainly has no relationship to a man or a woman. So when it says in that document that persons, men and women, and individuals are included, the only particle that we're interested in is the men and women that can be applied with full knowledge that those other men and women that glad-handed, dressed up in suits and said, oh, we've got all these resolutions to protect people, they are bound to protect men and women first, because persons and individuals are nondescript legal fictions. Men and women are living, breathing flesh and blood. Now, one of the resolutions that the United Nations put together, I think it was back in 1981, was called the elimination of all forms of discrimination and religious intolerance. So if you type the elimination of all forms of religious intolerance, you'll find it. This is a resolution of the United Nations put together to ensure that men and women in the world that were being intolerated, in other words, they were experiencing a lot of intolerance on the part of their vested corporate governments. And there were people that were complaining. So their glad hand approach was to put out this resolution that many of the countries that are members of the United Nations signed on to and ratified. Now, you'll have to look for your own particular country to see if it has ratified that particular resolution. There's also a resolution on civil and political rights. Again, rights are only applicable to fictions, whereas freedom is applicable to all who believe that they were created under Yahuwah, our Creator. So the private agreement method of bringing other people into awareness, as I've stated many times before, is deemed in law as notice to admit or a request for admissions. When one sees that the United Nations protocols were put in place and their resolutions as signed to and respected by the various countries, it's very important to note that those resolutions that have been ratified are binding upon the various state entities, and the point that they must go to the point of hardship to accommodate you. Now, that hardship is relative. You can find many papers written about the duty to accommodate and hardship. In Canada, you can find it by typing Parliament duty to accommodate into a search engine, and you'll bring up the parliamentary paper on that. Or if you typed Alberta duty to accommodate, you would find the Alberta Human Rights Commission, a paper on their duty to accommodate. You can also find it rendered in 180 of the Canadian Criminal Code, defined as nuisance. Anybody who brings you to the point of discomfort by failing to perform their duty is guilty of nuisance. So when you go to the taxman and say, I've got a problem, I'd like you to help me with this, I'm looking for your aid and direction, I'm considering joining a new church here and exercising my faith in Christ, and I'd like to find out from you if you have a statute, code, or regulation that would allow you to intimidate me, obstruct me, or act as a general nuisance to my ability to do what's common to all of Her Majesty's subjects in practicing my faith in the King James Bible. Well, when a man working for the tax department gets such a request, he won't know what it is. He won't know what duty to accommodate is. You'll have to go over his head. So it's best to go right to if you're in the States, to your governor's office and ask who in the office is familiar with their duty to accommodate, part of the United Nations resolutions, and you can mention the one and see if they're signatory to it, the elimination of all forms of religious intolerance. Along your quest, while you're asking these people, it will become aware to you that none of them seem to know anything about duty to accommodate. And this is why I call it a glad-handing approach. There was much fanfare and advertisement in media when all of these resolutions were being put together. And oh, look what we've got. We've got this wonderful document. We're going to eliminate religious intolerance. But when it comes down to the meat, the foot on the pavement, there isn't any. None of these people that work in the government's offices have a clue about what duty to accommodate means. So you have to quest after them to go to their legal departments and get somebody to explain how each officer of the government has a duty to accommodate you for your particular needs should you come forth with a demand that those needs be met. Well, since nobody in their offices knows anything about duty to accommodate, and most people I've spoken of, that some of them have studied law, and they've never heard of duty to accommodate. It would appear this glad-handing approach to make it all look good, like we're in honor, was just that. It was just a look-good exercise that nobody is told about, yet it is still founded in law, and Canada and other nations are signatory to this law. So you got to figure, well, why would they bother putting something in place like that and then not tell anybody about it so it can work? Well, the reason they did that is because they didn't want anybody to know about duty to accommodate. The public service employment contracts and the unions that run them don't want anybody to know that any of those public officers, those public servants, have any duty to their public at all. They just push paper and talk in circles and push some more paper. And that's what public servants do. Oh, and have meetings, lots of meetings and lots of answering machine messages. So when you phone, you don't get to speak to anybody because they're not there. They're too busy in a meeting somewhere, or they're on a vacation, or some other reason why you can't reach them. So diligence is necessary. You must continue in your effort to communicate to these government departments despite the fact there's nobody there when you call. Don't give up. Keep calling. Leave lots of messages. Be a diligent pest in ensuring that you get somebody within your government local offices to explain to you what duty to accommodate means, why it is a duty, why they are bound under that duty, and why they wouldn't know about it when you mention it to them as a point of law. And that would be the most interesting part when you bring it up to them and they know nothing about it. You might want to ask the man or woman that you finally find that knows about duty to accommodate why nobody's being educated as to that duty. Why haven't they had classes for every public servant and every official that knows about duty to accommodate when it's requested of them? That would be a good question to ask. My suggestion is the reason that nobody knows about it is because then there is no duty to accommodate anybody. Because when you bring it up, they just, I've never heard of such a silly thing, and they'll hang up on you or set you aside or just ignore you. So you must be extremely diligent and pointed, and you must even go to the particular United Nations website itself, get a copy of the link, and send it to them so they can see that they are indeed signatory to the United Nations resolutions. So I know that may sound a little complicated, but making a phone call is certainly not complicated. Finding out who you're going to make that phone call to would be pretty important. So I'm suggesting you call your governor's office or your premier's office, whoever is in charge of your particular locality. You call them and ask them that I have a need, a religious need, and I'd like somebody that understands what duty to accommodate is. I wish to be extracted from the corporate registry that my parents put me into when I was born. And I'd like to gain agreement with you that you have a duty to aid and direct me in that extraction process so that I can leave in honor and not be classified as some kind of religious fruitcake or a troublemaker or OPCA or some other label that may wish to be applied upon me simply because I wish to exercise my faith in Christ as found in the King James Bible. I'd like to know somebody that recognizes that they have to respect my ability to practice my faith in that King James Bible, and no intimidation or nuisance or obstruction of my ability to practice my faith is acceptable or lawful or sanctioned by your office. So please get back to me when you have that information. I am eager to deregister and have myself extracted from this system. I would also like a full audit of all accounts relative to the all capital backwards name that is applied on the record. There are numbers that are applied to that name, and these are the numbers not relative to myself as the man, the flesh and blood minister of Christ, but certainly are relative to an account, a Sediq trust that was set up when I was born collecting annuities. I would like that account audited and all value transferred to a private trust that is set up. I am steward over. I claim no ownership, but I am merely a steward, a minister of Christ, regulating the proceeds that were obtained in fraud, as can be found in Leviticus chapter 6, verses 2 through 5. The process of getting men and women to agree with you and listen to you is found in Matthew 5:25, Matthew 18:15 through 20. Please don't be shy of writing these men and women over and over and telling them that you're writing them in private and telling them that you have to do so because you can't respect persons. And the title that their office has is a person of law. You can quote Deuteronomy 1:17, Deuteronomy 10:17. You can quote 2 Samuel 14:14, Matthew 22:16, Acts 10:34, Romans 2:11, and James 2:9, demonstrating that if you respect persons, you commit sin and shall be convinced of the law as a transgressor. You can type in 1127 and Cornell into a search engine and bring up the United States explicit definition of the word person. So you can show them out of their own material that you can't possibly be a person, but you are indeed a man or a woman. It is very important to be diligent in showing these men and women working as government officials how you're not a religious fruitcake and a nut, but you have all the facts backing up why you can't respect persons, why you can't bow down to false gods. Deuteronomy 30:19 sets before us life and death. We get a choice. Well, the living law of God is Deuteronomy 4:2, Deuteronomy 12:32, not to be added to, not to be taken away from. And Leviticus 18:3 and 4 tells us we're not supposed to walk in the ordinance of the heathen. Well, heathen are people that add to God's law and take away from God's law. Exodus 20, verses 3 through 5, indicates to us that we're not supposed to bow down to false gods and we're not supposed to serve them. False gods are those that have added to God's law, and these government servants are helpless to explain where they got the authority to add to God's law, because they simply do not. They are false gods, and once you bring these facts up to them that you can't submit to them as titled false god persons of law, they're put in an uncomfortable position with their duty to accommodate your requests staring them in the face. They have to come up with a pretty good reason not to accommodate you. And once you've shown them that you're speaking to them as a man or a woman and not as a legal fiction office, well, now they're caught with private liability if they should not accommodate you, if they should discriminate against you, if they should intimidate or obstruct you, they're engaged in criminal activity. So it's very important along the way that you have witnesses to confirm your communications with these men and women and let them know. I'll be confirming your lack of an answer with witnesses confirming that you didn't refute these facts and that you do indeed agree with them and that we are in friendship, we are in honor, we have no argument. I thank you so much for aiding me in this process that may have been uncomfortable if not for your help. I look forward to possibly meeting you and receiving more information relative to the expulsion or expungement of these records from your files. Also, a record of the transfer of all annuities that were listed under the account into my private trust that I've sent you information about. Now, for those men and women who want to know about what a private trust is, a private trust is certainly not set up with a bank or any financial institution. It is set up with men and women that work in a private bank or financial institution, and you're showing them how you're not going to be opening up a public account, but you're going to be opening up a private account with other men and women in Christ, and that you don't have a social insurance number. It's not required by law, and you won't be accepting any usury on the account, and this account is a repository. It's very important to impress upon the bank that it is a repository. That takes away any assumptions that you're engaged in commercial activity by utilizing a depository. When you get the choice of words, whether you would be in repose or deposed, certainly the repose is the one with the light shining on it and relaxation and a smile on your face. Whereas deposed, you've been ousted, kicked out, rejected, refused, slighted, exposed. You certainly are not part of the light when you're in a deposit situation. So it's very important that the terminology is utilized and the time is taken to set up this account as a private trust. Now, I'm working with others right now to set up a private ecclesiastical trust because, not that it hasn't been done before, but many people that are questing along this road of getting out of Babylon are looking for that information. How do I set up a private trust? Well, myself and others are endeavoring to do that now, and when that information is available for you, I will provide it. Again, this has not been done before. To my knowledge, no man or woman throughout the world has escaped the slave camp that was put in place by what Christ referred to those who say they are Jews but are not in Revelations 2:9 and 3:9 in the King James. Many people along the road, when you start talking about these particular matters of religious faith and beliefs, will eventually point the finger at you and say that you're anti-Semitic because you're getting out of the slave camp and you're pointing to Leviticus chapter 25, 44 through 50 as proof that it exists, where God tells the Israelites to make purchases of men and women and to make them their possessions forever as an inheritance for their children. Those instructions were taken very seriously. And the offspring of the Israelites still exist today in some form, copied and taken over for a benefit by the Khazarian people that were adopted Judaism back in about the 16th century. They have no Jewish blood in them. They are called White Russian Jews. Khazaria has taken over Judaism in the form of Zionism, or with Talmud. Talmud is a 75-volume oral law of the rabbis going back millennia. It is utilized to take advantage of and decry the fact that all Gentiles are animals. They are given gifts by God to the Jews so that they can benefit and have work done for them by these cattle-type animals called humans. A human is one who has rejected divinity. So this is a real thing taking place. I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-fraud, I'm anti-slavery, I'm anti-abuse. Wish we had an uncle in there, but it turns out there's a lot of antis. It would appear that our ignorance, our failure to read the scriptures, our failure to be more spiritually connected with our Creator has allowed us to be slaves. We have, in ignorance, volunteered ourselves into these slave camps by registration. And it is only by communicating to the private men and women that act as the registrars and the treasurer for these corporations, getting an agreement that they must accommodate you, that you will be able to extract yourself out of the system. There is no magic form that you're going to fill out. There is no UCC form that you're going to file. You're not going to go to bed with a prostitute and affect creative copulation to get virginity and out of her bed. It's just some of the most bizarre, illogical thinking I've ever heard, with all of these people out there with their invented methods of getting out of Babylon by registry. You do not get virginity by creative copulation with a dead prostitute. It's just ridiculous. You have to go and expose that there's been a religious fraud, an error, a mistake, an abuse of your freedom that's taken place. You must get them to agree. And in the process, you're going to be waking them up to the slave camp as well, because none of them know about it. You have to wake them up to them and show them the detail of the slave camp for them to believe it, and then they'll take you seriously. And then in duty, they will aid you to expunge yourself from the record. So I hope this has helped clarify a bit more of how to get out of Babylon. This is in union with other men and women to act as your witnesses. Ask for them. Ask me. I'll be a witness for you. You have to utilize intelligent men and women that understand what you're doing, so when you ask them to bear witness for you, they will be there, ready, willing, and able. It's very, very important to understand that without your witnesses, you have nothing. You will be laughed at, you will be ridiculed, and you'll stay in the rough position that you're in, a slave. It is only by those witnesses that these men and women that occupy these offices will be encouraged to make a move. Otherwise, they just want to go back to sleep and ignore you and hope that you don't come back. But when you push them with the witnesses watching, now they're put in a privately liable position where they actually have to do something for you. And that's why the witnesses are so essential. So again, you can approach these men and women by telling them that you're newly washed with the blood of Christ and you wish to leave the corporate venue known as the United States or Canada, and you can show them the registration of those corporations on the United States Securities Exchange Commission. You can go to that website and type the names of the countries that you're looking for, and you will find that they are indeed there, listed as corporations on the United States Securities Exchange website. So I know that's a lot of things I've mentioned here for people to do, but enslavement, as in chains, was meant to keep you there, and there's going to be some work, of course, to get the chains off. All prayer and supplication and your generous efforts to be diligently in communication with them so they know who you are and that you're not trying to be an enemy. You're trying to be a friend, and you're trying to let them know that you're just as confused as they are. So I thank you so much for your time and listening to this short video relative to convincing men and women that act as public officials that they have a duty to accommodate your faith-based needs. So I thank you again, and may God bless. Bye for now, and have a great day.